So mistakes I made on Windows so you don't make them. Some of these mistakes are system breaking, some are just plain stupid, and that's why today I'm going to tell you exactly which mistakes I made, how you can avoid them, and a few tips that will help you sleep well at night. By the way, this video mainly applies to Windows 10 and 11. So let's start with the first point. I've used registry cleaners. In my case, I use CCleaner. By the way, it's called CCleaner, not how most of the people I know, including my younger self, called it CCleaner. But yeah. So using a registry cleaner in 2025 is one of the stupidest ideas you can make. You might ask me, why? Because today they do more harm than good. Because in like the Windows XP era and a little bit after it, they actually had a place for being actually a market. Because cleaning your registry back in those old days actually did something and improved your system most of the times. But today, let's say you are on a freshly installed Windows 10 or 11, especially in those cases, you set your system up for later down the road for mistakes and problems you don't want experience. So let's say in a hypothetical example here, you get 250 megabytes, so 1/4 of a gigabyte of storage back because you cleaned your registry. So your registry cleaner essentially just deleted unused registry entries, and like I said, this later down the road this can make really big problems. So in my own experience, I've bought my PC use of Kleinanzeiger, for those who know, and the install with Windows 10 just happened to come with an virus. Web Companion, for those who know. But let's just say, I'm at this point I had my PC over 1 year or about a year, and because I've used CCleaner in the past at that point in time. So just basically since the time I grew up and saw my father use it, I also used it. And one of the first things I did when I got my computer, I've installed CCleaner and I did a registry cleanup on that same install. And let's just say I had the biggest problems with Windows as a whole, probably caused because of missing registry entries, caused by, CCleaner or any other registry cleaner could cause it. When I updated my Windows, I couldn't update it. So I updated my Windows, but I couldn't launch in that updated Windows because some part of the update just failed and couldn't install. And let's say so, I was sent to the automatic repair screen. So I had to install an update after a week because you are on Windows, you are forced to install updates. I'm automatically sent to automatic repair. I had to uninstall the update in the automatic repair and then wait to get back on my desktop and know that a week from there or even in a smaller time frame I had to do this again and again. Yeah. So you might ask me, how did I fix it? I basically just installed a fresh install of Windows on a new NVMe because at the time I just upgraded from a 250 M2 SSD to a 1 TB Samsung SSD and PCI. It was just faster. It was upgrade time at the time. So I waited a little bit longer to do that, and I just freshly installed a new Windows on that new drive. You could just theoretically do that on my old drive. Like I said, it was just upgrade time, but who wants to freshly install Windows in the week, especially if you have data to move and so on. But just like I said, nowadays they just cause more headache and problems than they do good or improve your system. Because depending also on the registry itself, they're just crap software. If it's crapware, spyware, adware, or all of them, like I said, it depends on the software itself. You get the heck out of it. Advertise even some false claims that your banking is unsafe if you don't upgrade to a pro plan. So just like that. By the way, this example with the banking also applies to a later point with antivirus software. So a great question that comes after you heard this or even experience it yourself is, what can you do to keep Windows great and performant nowadays? And mainly there are just three ways, and depending on what you feel comfortable with and what you want to do, it's the thing to do. So first of all, I had a great colleague of mine that had an older laptop, let's say about 8 years old, and it's a consumer item. It wasn't at the time the greatest and best of it. It was just a consumer level laptop from that era with an i3, i5, something about that. And like I said, it is about an 8-year-old laptop that my colleague has, and he also has Windows on it installed. And let's say even himself recognized how slow his laptop got, especially in the last year, 2 years, something about that. And my friend just did a plain factory reset. He also just didn't have much data of himself on his laptop, so it was easy for him. But if you have, your browser tabs, let's say some files or games on your drive, it becomes a little bit of a harder process, especially if it is unorganized and you have to back it up or pull it on another drive. But yeah, my friend just did a plain factory reset, and he immediately noticed an improvement over his existing install. So it's the same install, but just factory resetted. And after 8 years or so of this laptop existing and being in his hands or even his parents, Windows just, from all the Windows updates, from the using of the people itself, like installing programs, uninstalling programs, a lot of unused stuff just built up and also slowed down the system. Even if at some point it was used, if it nowadays isn't used, and also auto starts on system startup, it uses just the resource, even if without it being used. The second way to keep your Windows great in performance nowadays, to just use the built-in tools into Windows to clean up your system. So great examples for that are open Task Manager and go to Auto Start apps and disable apps you don't use or don't need to auto start every single time you boot up your system, to uninstall your applications that you don't use, depending on how long the last time was where you checked up on which apps you installed and what you use. You can just pick 10 minutes at a lazy evening and clean up that stuff you don't use, and you get more storage back, but also if the program is running in the background, get also performance back. It was in this case wasted on something you even didn't use. Sometimes it's a great idea to use certain programs to auto sort them, but for 99% of people, it's never is really that case. And also just really be conscious of what you do on the internet, in the sense of what you download, to which sites you go, and stuff like that. And like the third way, besides of just reinstalling Windows, is to optimize your Windows with external tools. And like the only one tool that I can really recommend, and doesn't do shady stuff and I actually use, is WinUtil. I've been using WinUtil itself like for a long time now, and I've used it on my own systems, on my family systems, like my father's, my mother's, and even my grandma's, but also like with just good friends and so on. But it's with WinUtil, it's like one of the cases where it's actually just good software, because things like Tiny11 or even Atlas OS exist, which especially in the beginning did shady stuff. Like even Tiny11 now just does it in a way that you give them the official ISO, and then it does debloat the ISO and does the changes which it does. But the thing with WinUtil is you launch it from an admin PowerShell, because it does deep changes in your system, and it's like the golden line between having an optimized system and having an unusable system, especially be like with a system of Microsoft or Windows in this case, where it isn't built with from the community, or like being like very modular. It's really just monolithic. You just can't throw a part out of it and think some other stuff won't break. Even though you just can really, especially why I recommend it, because WinUtil disables all the stuff that you don't use, that use especially your CPU, on which your like older laptops and slower desktops really will shine. And it also uses less RAM, because that shit is in your RAM, even if you don't ever use it. And one thing to really keep in mind, I'm really an advocate for WinUtil. It even had a big update lately. The slower or weaker your hardware is, the more performance you will regain with WinUtil if you do the performance tweaks. Let's get to the second point. I've installed apps I didn't use. So, like I said, because I just frankly talked about it in the first point, when you install apps you don't use, you are essentially just wasting storage, loading up your system. But also, one thing I thought about, it's just another piece in a puzzle that could be a security risk. Let's say you've installed some software you've played around with or just never really used. And let's say with an update, because this app also automatically updates itself, was infected with malware. And you're running your day-to-day tasks, if you're a gamer, if you're just doing work. It's just, like I said, a bigger surface for security holes. And especially if you don't use it or don't use it anymore, why still leave it there? And essentially, yeah, that was a thing that could happen but rarely happens. But also, it doesn't necessarily need to be that way, that you might have get hacked or get infected with malware or any other piece of shit software. And yeah, you can even uninstall your apps, like I said, just on an evening, depending on how many apps you don't use or as a whole you have installed on your system. Can just take a little bit of time, let's say, like I said, just a minutes on an evening, go through your installed apps and uninstall the apps you don't use. Or especially if the apps you use are outdated, update them. Because like I said, in most of the time they could be security issue. And yeah, essentially there are also two ways to get to the menu, like the old control panel uninstall thing. So you can just type control panel and get there and click on uninstall apps and have the old menu from Windows 7 or Vista. Or you can do it in the new Windows setting app, which let's say sometimes is really messy. So you choose your poison in this case. So as the third mistake I made on Windows, I've installed Windows falsely. So especially Windows 24H2 takes a hell of a lot time to install, because you just see it from how large the ISO is, about more than 6 gigabytes, nearly 7 depending on your version. And it also has like this weird cat surfing game to distract the zoomers who install it. And yeah, it's just a bad install as a whole, because you also must keep in mind the old Windows installation things, that you need to have a Microsoft konto or really need to know how to create a local account, because even disabling Ethernet, so pulling essentially your Ethernet cable out, or not enabling your Wi-Fi in the Windows installation if you're on my laptop, sometimes doesn't work. And if you know how to bypass it, which also the first time you're doing it takes a bit of time to figure it out. By the way, it's like OB bypass in a row. To bypass it and Windows restarts, then you can just create a normal local user. But like I said, sometimes they fuck up shit and it might no longer work. But yeah, it works like since over 2 years with the OB bypass in a row. So you might have luck with this one. But you still need to know this thing exists, and most people don't know it. So they just create a Microsoft konto. Also might fuck it up while they do it, and yeah. So essentially, with a story I can tell you. So nearly 2 months ago, my uncle called me because a colleague, worker, co-worker, whatever, doesn't really matter, just bought a new laptop, a Samsung Galaxy Book 4 with an Intel Core 3 100U, so one of the newer processors, still not the latest and greatest, but newer. And so let's just say he messed up the installation a bit. Because, like you know, you buy a laptop or buy a PC, and it comes most of the times with Windows pre-installed. And he bought the laptop at the shop, set it up, so he didn't bother with a local account because most of people don't know it. And he created himself a Microsoft account, set the birthday to some day of January 2025, and yeah, he couldn't log into his Windows. Because, like I said, he set his birthday like he at the time he would be just a few days old, and he needed to finish like he needed to finish his Guardian setup. So if his parents allowed him to use Windows, by the way, he was over 40. You might as well know it from Google's family link. If you're a kid or a parent, you know it. And it's like the same with Microsoft Windows and especially Microsoft accounts. So especially if those are under 13 or even under 18, you have like parent control and shit. And the thing was, it was really hard to reverse engineer that, to find the place or button or bad tense, I must say, where you can reset his age. Even if you log into I've logged into the Microsoft account of his on another PC, mainly my PC, through my browser, and even there was the same problem. And at the end, before actually 10 minutes before I gave back him the laptop, I figured it out, because it was hidden like few buttons, I don't know, few buttons, few layers, and then you could change his birthday of the account. But essentially, I did what I did before that. I I've got the Windows registration key out of that system, even though it was the BIOS safety first, like that, just to be sure. Yeah, and I just reinstalled Windows, but I've used my WinUtils MicroWin, and MicroWin is essentially like you just debloat your Windows installation, and you get an automated installation. Besides that, you at the start of the installation you pick your language, your keyboard layout, and so on, and then partition your disks if you need to. And yeah, you create your local user accounts before that, so you download the ISO basically, throw it into WinUtil, you set a name or don't set a name for your account. You might, even if you're on the same machine like that, you can pull the drivers out of it and put it in the ISO. And yeah, let's just say I did it on my machine, so I didn't have the drivers, and I installed that ISO on a laptop, like I said, on the Samsung Galaxy Book 4. And like you can see here, firstly the ISO is almost a gigabyte in this case, smaller than the original, in some cases even smaller than 1 gigabyte and more. But that's like the general rule, depending on the version and so on. That's a rule of thumb. But I'm being honest with you, especially because I didn't do that what I said, that you can pull out the drivers. The trackpad, why I installed Windows, didn't work. I just plugged in a mice in and installed Windows. Like I said, you just had to choose your language, your keyboard layout, and so on, and just partition the disk, and it just installed under 10 minutes. Keep in mind that was Windows 2024 H2. But the trackpad then did work after it was installed, and especially when Windows updates pulled in the drivers, because by the way, most of the drivers nowadays are included within the operating system, or in Windows case within the updates. So, which, back in the Windows XP days and before that, wasn't really the case. So, as a fourth mistake I made on Windows, I've used external antivirus software. And antivirus software, especially on Windows, is an own topic for itself. But I'm really, first of all, like I just said, that you are conscious what you do with your PC, what you do online, what you download, what you install, things like that. But also, Windows has a little thing called Windows Defender. So basically, it's just a built-in antivirus in Windows. And nowadays, I would just say just use Windows Defender, because for the longest time, especially of my existence, I've used Avast antivirus software. And let's say the TLDR here is, it's just rubbish. Like I said in the first point, where you had your registry cleaners and your ads, especially antivirus software, they bother you with pop-ups, with with deals, and they especially slow down your system, and in the end, most of the time they don't really secure yourself, especially if you use a free antivirus. Like I just said, just use Windows Defender for most of things you do nowadays on Windows. It just works. If you do risky stuff, just get another machine. isolated in a virtual machine, or if you're really paranoid, just install CubeOS and do stuff there. But yeah, even if virtual machine bypassing virus software exists, for the most part you are then more secure if you just did it on your system. But like I said, just others and other antivirus software is like shit. You know, others antivirus, AVG. By the way, these are owned by the same company, Kaspersky and Bitdefender, Norton, especially Norton and McAfee, the OGs. Nowadays, I treat them like actual malware or spyware, because, like I said, especially in McAfee's and Norton case, things overlap. So just don't use them, uninstall them. If you buy a new PC with Windows pre-installed, get one. It isn't really worth it. Watch what you do online and be conscious to don't do stupid stuff. And last but not least, as the fifth mistake I made on Windows, I didn't use a package manager. Package manager, if you come from Linux or even macOS, if you use Brew with it, Homebrew, you always have a package manager. And coming from that, managing your software with a package manager is like really another way to manage your system, and as a whole it's just faster and more convenient. But Windows, which you might not really know, has like a built-in package manager, which is Winget, but there also are existing external package managers like Chocolatey and Scoop. But yeah, for like with package managers, I can just type in shell as an example here. Winget install. Let's say I'm wanting to install VLC. In Winget's case, it's really weird. So in VLC's case, with Winget, it's Winget install videolan.vlc. You click enter. You might click enter to confirm you want to install it. Boom, you wait, or don't even wait, depending on the size of the program, and you have VLC in this case installed. And just like with another examples and practical stuff. And most of the software you use is already in Winget or other package managers, because the only two examples of software I use, especially on a daily basis, like DaVinci Resolve and MPV, the video player. By the way, MPV is the best video player, if you didn't know. For DaVinci Resolve, it's one thing to go to the websites, and for DaVinci Resolve, that's my like really only exception, to go to the website and download it from there, because you have to fill out their formula and blah blah blah, and download from there. And because it's written, because it isn't on in any package manager on Windows as far as I know. Secondly, MPV, I've just installed through another package manager, like an external one, so you have to firstly install it. But I've just installed it through Chocolatey. You could even install it through Scoop, but in my case I chose to install it through Chocolatey. And like I said, most of the other programs I install through Winget. The summary. So yeah, these were 5 mistakes I made on Windows. I hope you learn from my mistakes, and so you don't make them, because, you know, knowing mistakes or how to avoid them is one thing, but learning from the mistakes of others is like the other thing, which not all people do. Also, if you want personal help from me while switching from Windows to Linux, It's the first link in the description. Other than that, you can like and subscribe, especially if you like the video. Leave a comment, and other than that, we will see us in the next time. Bye.